Today on our Tech for Business podcast, we are talking about DeepSeek, which is a new AI out in the world surrounded with some concerns. Kyle, our president and CEO, and Todd, our COO and CISO, join us. And just quick, to solidify us in time, it is early February 2025. We're recording this. So all of the information is up to that point if you're listening to this in the future. I'd love, Todd and Kyle, just to get your first impressions or your initial thoughts.
In regards to, I saw all the news on the DeepSeek. It got a lot of publicity. It got a lot of initial chatter side on it. I think obviously from a costing and effectiveness, it got a lot of instantaneous review side on it. And just out of curiosity right away, I go in the App Store and say, oh, let me check this thing out. But again, as soon as I saw that it was all Chinese on the publisher side, I said, nope. And right back out of there and just started looking there because, again, I think a lot of things usually at face value, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is, and just say, what's the catch? I mean, when you start to see these things, I think just by nature, you start running through those sides and saying, no, I'm going to be highly suspect of this side of it. And did see some things come out about how they got a hold of NVIDIA technology when they're not supposed to. All these other things started to show up on these things, that some of the stuff coming out, and I don't know what's valid or what's not from those sides of it. But again, highly suspect on a lot of things, that there's definitely probably more to meets the eye on what's going on with this side of it. So again, haven't used it, but I mean, understand it seems to be very effective and seems to be from its result that people are seeing. But what's happening with that information and what's going through those sides, I think is highly suspect and requires a lot more review.
Yeah, from my initial reactions, it's kind of been all over the map. I mean, similar to Kyle, hearing the initial news, how it impacted NVIDIA specifically, then hearing that they quickly started to have some security events happen almost immediately after. Been a bit of a roller coaster. And then, as Kyle said, as the longer this goes along, the more information comes out, and you're kind of going, wow, there's a lot of conflicting data out there. And so that part's interesting. But the other part that I guess I'd throw on there is, it's one of those moments where I look at the world and say, that technology leap, assuming it's everything they claim it to be, is significant, right? At some point, we knew AI was going to get significantly better. And if it's just outperforming a lot of the other tool sets out on the internet already or currently available to people, that's a significant leap in technology. And so that part in and of itself, I think, is fantastic. And I'll make probably a terrible analogy, but I kind of look at it similar to the way that I looked at the iPhone when it came out decades ago. And the first time it came out, I was like, that's not for me, but holy crap, is that going to change the world? And it really did. It's kind of surprising. But like I said, it's hard to know exactly what you're seeing. I personally haven't used it either. To Kyle's point, shortly after we started this process, we shut it down for CIT and made sure that we did not go too terribly into the weeds about the tool set. And again, there are some concerns about storing data in the China data service.
Yeah, I think anything inherently side, again, if you see anything that's China, if they are storing in China, obviously the government can come and just take it. So, I think you have to be just aware of that side of it and just know that, okay, if you like to use that side, it's extremely likely that it could be leveraged and accessed by a foreign government side, and anything essential should definitely be withheld out of there. So, but my understanding is that it does have an open source side of it. There is an offline version of it and those things, but I think there's a lot of caveats on knowing if you do have it, geo-fence properly and a number of things to make sure that it's good. Just there's again enough there to present caution, and I think you need to properly assess like any new tool, but specifically one that is obviously in a foreign government, can be viewed as a hostile foreign government in a lot of ways. Be very careful.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's really interesting to see what's kind of happened in the wake of, and I do like the comment about forking into your private data if you want to do that. But I wanted to kind of put in this tagline that I've heard throughout it, and I'm sure it's probably not even unique at this point because I've seen it everywhere. But they're talking about it being a disruptor to the point of it's the AI Sputnik moment, if you will. which is that whole, now it's an arms race, right? And if you look, if you're looking at Meta, you're looking at, I think Elon Musk said, if you're not dumping $10 billion into your AI, you're behind. It's an arms race. But yeah, we can dig into some of the other stuff too, is there are a lot of people that are starting to pull it down and work on it locally. But to Kyle's point, a lot of the stuff that they're looking into is, if you're doing that, in my opinion, you should be pretty cautious about what you're doing with it. You should make sure you're paying attention to see if any data is leaving the network. So, for example, like I said, we don't allow it on the CIT systems and all. But if you were to do it at home, you'd really want it in a very isolated environment where you can pretty much track everything that's going on to see if there is data leakage that's going on. And then, of course, all the other things that we talk about is know what you're putting into the system, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, like all AI, it's really training to see what we can get. And it should help with a lot of things. I'm really interested to see what the next stages of AI are. But in the interim, it's really a lot of business data. How do people do business? And it's a lot of intellectual capital at the moment, too.
Mhm.
I wonder if it is important to really dive into the security concerns, because I think a lot of people are hearing DeepSeek came out. It's, a Chinese company, and that's where it's sourced from. And then everybody's shutting it down. There's a little bit more to it than that. There are some security concerns about where the data is stored and how long. And I was reading a little bit about keystroke tracking. There are some serious privacy concerns and security risks for this. Can we talk a little bit more about that?
When it comes to countries, there are some concerns about it.
Yeah.
There are several regulations that are out currently. I'll use GDPR in the EU as a great example. Is you have to contain your data into the EU. If you cannot, you're not supposed to be able to use those tool sets. So it is a real concern. There are some similar stuff going on in the US. California's got it. It's regulations and so forth as well. And they're starting to mirror pretty similar to each other. So there are concerns about where does my data go. Some of the other concerns that I'll touch on real briefly and then turn it over to Kyle is the fact that one of the things, I guess I'll mention this as GDPR too, is once it's on the server, they did not make any statements that say you have the right to be forgotten, which is one of the tenets of GDPRs. If I say, please delete my data, you have to. That's not the case in this case. This data could be indefinitely stored. So you don't have those types of functionalities. And then, yeah, like you said, if you're looking at privacy concerns, getting into the tracking that they're doing, it's pretty in depth. I mean, to get into the cadence and how you're typing and whatnot, that's some pretty specific information they're gathering. You can kind of, if you're paranoid like I am, and that's very, and you can kind of see what they're really trying to do long term is how do they figure out who I am and what I'm interested in, and basically can I identify you just by the way you type.
Yeah. It's always it's again very very scary. And again, I don't like to paint just that oversimplification side, but again, there's certain areas where geographically, if it's coming from a country like China, it's like, I don't trust it. Sorry, I'm out. I think this the controls and regulation sides, as Todd alluded to, they're just not there. They don't adhere to a lot of the things that protect a lot of the privacy acts that we have here in the States, and even in the UK and then in European area sides of those. It's things I think we take for granted that do have these protection sides of those, again, are going to be, you're kind of waiving those rights by allowing this to go into a country where you don't have those protection sides on it. So for good reason, we have regulatory control sides on it. I think you need to be very, very cautious of implicitly trusting that, or getting this to be too good to be true, right? It works as good or better than ChatGPT. He's like, sure, take everything I have. Be very careful and lured into that, kind of offering you candy out of a white man a little bit. I think something's going on. I don't trust it. That's just where I'm at. I'm like, I know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the same boat too. I'm not, when I currently have a lot of other priorities in front of me before digging deep into seeing what's going on in there. And there's a lot of other people playing with it, and I'll let that happen naturally. But to the point of why would somebody do it? In theory, it could be something that's a significant saving. So it is much faster. It's using a lot less resources, et cetera. And again, to me, this is the disruptor factor of trying to find what the next quantum leap, if you will, of what AI is. This might be one of those pieces. It's just a piece. It's not the whole, where are we going with AI long term? I mean, if you listen to the futurists, they talk about AI will be able to solve the energy problem for us. So we should eventually get to zero cost energy because AI will help us get there. So those are the kinds of things that I would say much bigger leaps than just an LLM. However, if you're using it in your day-to-day business and it's a big deal and you could spend a lot less money on it, there may be some benefits on it. But how you would do that, I mean, like Kyle's saying, I would be incredibly paranoid. I would have my own instance. I would lock it down. I wouldn't allow it to leak any data out. There'd be no egress, et cetera. So there's probably some ways to secure it, but I would have to do a really deep dive on it before I got super comfortable trying to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, it seems like an awful lot of work when you have other alternatives that already, protect you in between, whether it's Copilot or, Google's Gemini through their G Suite license. Other side, I mean, there's a lot of other stateside ones that I would consider already, are perfectly fine in a corporate environment side and have data privacy and security. So again, I think, you have alternatives that I think work from an LLM standpoint. I think pay the extra money and know your data's safe. That's my take on it. I do think if you look at the plus side of this, again, having a lower cost disruptor on those other sides of those could potentially, cause the cost of the existing commercial ones, your Copilots and Geminis, those things, to respond with lower costs. So your ChatGPTs and those things feel some cost pressure in the marketplace to want to respond by lowering their costs as well as an entry point. So that could be assist in that way too. Again, having a disruptor can be good because it will allow for a competitive market to happen, which that is good. You don't want just like three main players or whatever in the United States, and they could kind of almost a little bit of collusion side of it, say we kind of set our price and this is what it's going to be. We're going to get this premium and we're going to keep this premium for a number of years. Well, again, if you got somebody coming in and they can disrupt it and say, nope, do it, it's going to force their hand to, get more competitive, and it could also force them to innovate even faster, that they have to scale in their investments in those other sides too. So I think it's good to shake the cart. But from using this actual product,
yeah, I will say that there should be some caution too. I wouldn't just say Copilot is wildly secure and privacy oriented to start with.
But looking for you now.
But Kyle mentioned it. If you're doing the paid version of Copilot, you do get a private access. It's not training on the data that you're sending it from, whatever, if you're just doing edge searches and whatnot. So I just want to be cautious of saying that they still have their concerns out there too. But I do agree on the transition, and I kind of threw out the tagline of the Sputnik moment is, it seems like the race is on, right? I mean, if you look at the big players, I think Meta said they're spending something around $30 to $40 billion of investment into it. Apple's going to be in. So the investment is going to go hard and heavy. And where I'm going with that is, hopefully that means that you're going to see the technology leaps and bounds behind it. So the fact that you get a disruptor in the field does change technology. And if you're nerds like we are, that's an amazing thing. We're super excited to see where these kinds of things take us. I mean, AI in general is really quite interesting. I use it quite a bit. I find it to be incredibly helpful in my day-to-day work. And it's really not been that long since I started using it. And yet I find the tool just to be wildly convenient. And so as you see these things starting to come, it potentially is really exciting what's behind it.
Yeah, I find I don't Google anymore. what I'm looking for. If I did, like I said, I would tend to use Gemini or Xgrok, those kind of things to query against things and find more relevant information on whatever I'm searching for, rather than just Googling a topic and getting a bunch of web links and going through those things. It's just so much easier to go to those AI tools and get in a language model here's the site and here's some links. This is basically what it means and those things. It's far more informative and better, I find. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think to Todd's point, I mean, that's only been within the last year side kind of change in habit on where that's going. And is that, you see it in the Apple Intelligence now, where Siri has that now, where Siri's integrated into that. So again, what used to be a web search is now an AI language learning module side that's coming back with the results. So it's far more in depth, and it gets better all the time. Its ability and its response and speed and fast that it's getting to is see it exponentially. Seems like every month a new update comes out, and it's
Yeah.
oh, you can do this now, something better. And I mean, it's really exciting, and it can be scary a little bit. I can get that, but for the most part, I think it's more exciting than scary by a far stretch for me. When I look at it, I think the use of it keeps coming up more and more useful all the time, I think.
Yeah. What do you think the competition is really going to be? Where do you think sort of the next step of these AI models are going to grow to? Does that make sense? Like, cost is clearly a big driver, but what are the other things that are going to grow in AI? In your opinion, it's hard to say.
I was gonna preface it a little bit. The short answer for the question you specifically asked is I don't know. but to give a little bit more context of where I'm coming from, I mentioned it at the beginning of the podcast, is I don't know exactly what really happened. So they came in and they said that they came in at some ridiculously low level, something like $6 million to train the AI. And now reports are coming out that was incorrect. I read a report the other day that said, I want to say it was on like Time or something like that came back and said they had to use something along the lines of 50,000 GPUs, which is not $6 million. I mean, it's way more than that. And so what information is really out there, I don't know. But the fact that if it is potentially using less GPU, less horsepower, less energy, those are all big things. And again, to find the efficiencies in it is a huge thing. So current AIs use a ton of power and a ton of water in order to generate the benefits that we're talking about. So the fact that it could potentially get really efficient, I think is really good. But again, in my opinion, where we're at today with AI is it's really largely that language model. And really all it's trying to get to is that point where you start to be able to talk to it like a human. Now, are you going to get your great results? Not necessarily, but what is coming after that is the stuff that's really interesting. And so those are the leaps that we'll be seeing. But just to kind of give a little bit of context of what's really changed with AI is if you've got something like Google Home, for example, and you told the Google machine that you wanted to turn off a light, all that would be able to handle it once. And there is some nuance to it. You can kind of pause a second and then give it another direction. But if you use Gemini, you can talk to it like you would expect. I need you to turn off the lights in the living room, lock the front door, and turn on the heater in the bedroom, and it will be able to handle all of those tasks simultaneously. So the tool sets are dramatically getting better, but is that the end game for AI? No, I don't think so. I mean, I think you start looking with AI and robots and where does that go? And boy, it's an interesting place in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's just the integration of it into a lot more of our daily lives in the sets. I think the Google Assistant and, Alexa and all those other things getting more of this, AI intelligence into these things where it starts to do predictive sides of it. And again, starts to make suggestions to you side of it, things like, oh, Todd, I see you're not in the living room. Would you like me to turn the living room lights off for you? Those kind of things where he doesn't even have to ask, where it's making the suggestion side of it just by knowing that he's no longer in his living room side of it. So maybe I should save some power and turn that off. Or I see you're going in there. Would you like me to turn that on? Or Todd, I see you're almost home. Would you like me to turn up your thermostat for you? Those kind of things that are starting to do more predictive things. And I think even into the business side where it's able to do more real-time analysis side of it and give you suggestions based on trends automatically for you to put you in the right direction. That's where you're seeing you kind of see it going. And I think things like Tesla's Optimus robot and those kind of things are going to integrate it into those things, are going to, kind of bring it into more of our world where you see a humanoid robot with intelligence. to go through those things to kind of allow for even more interactions and more real-time working assistance in a physical world side of those even. So not just all digital. So I think definitely where you see it moving towards. I noticed in the latest iOS update side, I think it's starting 18.3 now, it summarizes the notifications for you. So again, it's just giving you a summary rather than the post. It just summarizes a quick thing. So kind of already seeing this predictive stuff start to show up more and more all the time. So
I think that comment's really interesting. I use Android Auto in my car, and I get a lot of Teams messages and whatnot as I'm commuting and traveling to customer sites and whatnot. And it will summarize a great deal of them. And it's interesting to me because it'll default to the summary and it'll play it back to me in a summarized format. And you go, wow, that was actually really clean. And then I'll be like, what did I miss? So then I'll play the original too. And I'll just kind of contemplate. It's amazing how much information it distilled down into the summary, but it is doing it on the fly today. And I find it amazing and extremely helpful because it does really make things easier to consume.
Yeah, I did. I was reading a PDF that was like, I don't know, 30 pages long. So I interacted with Copilot, and it wasn't just a summary. It was like, what are the key points? Tell me more about this. Tell me more about that. Just the way that I was reading this PDF with an AI was totally different. It was just a different experience, and I got so much more out of it, because I had that tool there to help me kind of pull it apart.
Yeah.
So,
I think it really is. And as it gets into more and more of our application size, those things, I mean, it does help out tremendously, Stein, as you go through it.
So to bring this back to DeepSeek, because that is what we're talking about today, because we love AI and we use it, where do you see DeepSeek going? Do you think it's going to kind of die on the vine for us in the United States? Or do you think people are going to be able to pull it apart and figure out a local solution or a way to make it work here? Do you think a totally new model is going to come out of this that people in our country could use?
My take is unless they get that stateside, if they do a stateside, US-based version side of it, it's gone. It's gone for the United States. That's what I think is coming. I mean, if you can criticize TikTok in the way they have, I just can't see how this gets a pass. I just really, really have a hard time seeing that, dude. I mean, this is gathering far more reaching information than TikTok ever would. So if you view that as a threat, I don't see how this is okay. So they may very well, be able to get a U.S. affiliate side of it here and have it, somehow U.S. owned or have some investment here that they get around it. I don't know. I don't know how far they'll take it from it. My initial gut feel is it's going to be here and gone, and something else will kind of probably rise to it to take its place that won't have as many questions behind it at some point. But because it already seems like it's quieting down. I mean, there was a lot of chatter really early on, and then like when the initial, so just based on that.
I was gonna say all the security professionals were like, no, black, and then it died.
Yeah. I mean, and that just may be just me because we have a lot of other, the stuff that kind of hits the news feeds and stuff. There's so much political stuff going on here. It can kind of get squashed lost with all the noise on the other side of it because it's just so many other things rapidly changing right now in our time. But it seems like it quieted down pretty quick. Like I said, saw a lot of stuff hit on it. I got curious, looked at it, and then so as that backed out, and then we had some conversations around it. But already this week, I don't see as much on it. Like it's not as rapidly being spoken of. But I haven't gone searching for it either. But it hasn't hit feeds, which means it's probably not as actively chatted on. But
yeah,
I think the risk is high. So I would anticipate, like Kyle said, is it almost indefinitely will be blocked by the U.S. and they'll ask us to turn it down. I think it's possible that there is some private version of it that may still be available if they can make it appropriately. It'll be interesting to see if they can get a U.S. based one, but it wouldn't surprise me if they tried really hard because, again, I think there is the intent of training the AI for specific reasons, and the U.S. is of interest anyway, although there's rumors of how they train their AI too. So open AI is out there, and I don't know how that impacts them long term. But to answer your question, yes, I would expect it to get blocked before too long if it is, very soon. Longer term, like I said, I do think, as you use the phrase arms race, I was kind of staying away from it because I didn't like the implication of it. But because of that, I do think we'll continue to see the evolution. And I actually think this will accelerate that. So again, everybody's committing heavy to it, their additional investment into the tool set. So I do think you're going to see an acceleration of what's happening in AI. But as far as DeepSeek itself goes, I suspect that it really won't be much in the US anymore because, if a customer came to me and said, what would you do? I'd say, block it. Generally speaking, when it comes to AI, we caution how people deploy it. Start small, make sure you don't feed it intellectual information, anything that's private to your organization, don't feed any PII, PHI, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of where we're at in general. But again, until you can get over the privacy concerns, I would say don't use the tool. And so with that in mind and several other people like-minded like us, I would imagine it'll dry up pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think, arms race probably isn't too far from the truth side on it, because there is the government's interest around the globe on, having the strongest AI technology come from your country side of those is definitely of a lot of, political concerns, around those sides. I know, the new administration here is very pro on that and wants to see, US based companies be the leaders and go through those sides on it. And I'm sure China wants the same, as does other country sides of those. So I think you're going to see a lot of, government assistance from that are going to help, position kind of key strategic companies within their countries to foster, strong advancements in this space. So it's going to be interesting to watch for sure. But I think there's definitely a political element to it. For sure. It's very, very much so. So it's beyond just the commercial use.
Yeah. Well, AI, it's a huge topic. We will definitely come back to it in the future. I'll make sure we'll link some resources in our description. Thank you so much, Kyle and Todd, for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this topic, please let us know. Like, subscribe, or reach out to us at info@cit-net.com or head out to our website, cit-net.com/podcast. We'll be back next week with an all-new episode.